Subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon so that you know when live we go. Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified. In this session, we are going to discuss today's newspaper, The Hindu, Delhi edition, dated 8th of November 2020. We will be taking up important articles and discuss them from the perspective of civil service examination. The articles that we are going to take up for discussion has been tabulated in front of you. The time stamping for the same has been given in the description section. There is an article on page number 1. India successfully launches Earth Observation Satellite EOS-1. India has launched a pack of 10 satellites. One of them was Earth Observation Satellite 01 and the other 9 were the customer satellites from United States, Lithuania and Luxembourg. 4 satellites were from US, 4 from Luxembourg and 1 technology demonstration satellite from Lithuania. All these 4 satellites were launched in the polar orbit by Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle. It has been almost an year since ISRO has launched a mission. The last mission that was launched by ISRO was RISAT 2BR1. This was back in December 2019. Because of COVID-19 pandemic, everything was log-jammed. All satellites were placed precisely into 575 kilometer orbit. This is in the range of low Earth orbit, but generally low Earth orbit is considered between 600 to 800 kilometer. Very few satellites are put in orbit below 500 kilometer because then the air drag becomes considerable and the satellite starts to lose the path of the orbit very fast. There is one thing that might be bugging you here. That is this nomenclature EOS-01, Earth Observation Satellite 01. The name is little deceptive. It does not mean that this is the first Earth observation satellite of India. In fact, India has one of the largest constellation of Earth observation satellite. But with this name EOS-01, ISRO is moving to a new naming system of its Earth observation satellite. Till now, the Earth observation satellite were named according to the purpose. For example, Cartosat. Cartosat series of satellites were meant to provide data for land topography and mapping. Similarly, OceanSat satellites were meant for observation over sea. There are many such series of observation satellites like ResourceSat, InSat, GSat, ScatSat and this present series RISAT. In fact, initially this EOS-01 was planned to be named as RISAT 2BR2 and this RISAT 2BR2 now has been renamed as EOS-01 and perhaps from now on the Earth observation satellites will be named in this order: EOS-02, EOS-03, EOS-04 and so hence and so forth. In our discussion, we will discuss mainly 2 things. One is the Earth observation satellites and second, Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle. Because of new technology adoption that has happened to our PSLV, it's important to be discussed. As the name suggests, Earth observation satellites are one that gather information on physical or chemical or biological composition of the system, a part of the Earth, a landscape for which the satellite is designed. Earth observation satellite uses many equipments for remote sensing, and that is why sometimes they are also called as remote sensing satellite. But there is a slight difference. Remote sensing not necessarily creates an image. It can give information about the physical, chemical or biological composition based upon signaling, but not necessarily a mapping or a photograph 2-dimensional or 3-dimensional will be created of the system. But when we say Earth observation, that generally implies that we have a 2-dimensional or 3-dimensional pictorial representation of the landscape. Regarding Earth observation satellite, the most important thing that we need to understand is sun synchronous orbit. Because most of the Earth observation satellite, not all, most of them, they are placed in the sun synchronous orbits. Some of the Earth observation satellites are also placed in geostationary orbits. To understand Sun synchronous orbit, first we need to understand polar orbits. See, a polar orbit is one where satellite passes above or nearly above both the poles in each revolution. Practically, the deviation can be very large. Even when the deviation is up till 30 degree from the poles, still the satellite is classified as polar satellite. The advantage of polar satellite is that it can cover the entire Earth in multiple revolutions. Because when the satellite is revolving around the Earth is also rotating around its axis. So when the satellite in the polar orbit passes through multiple latitudes, the points on Earth on multiple longitudes will be crossing the satellite as well. And when this happens many times, then the mapping of entire Earth will be done. A Sun synchronous orbit is a kind of polar orbit in which the satellite remains stationary with respect to the Sun. If you join the 3 points, the center of the Earth, the center of the Sun and the satellite, then that triangle will not change its inclination. To say it otherwise, the position of the satellite with respect to the Sun will not change. And to say it in a more practical manner, the satellite passes over any given point on the planet at the same mean local solar time. This means that suppose at any given point on Earth's surface, the satellite crosses at 3 o'clock in afternoon, then every point on Earth will be mapped at 3 o'clock in afternoon. Because the position of the satellite with respect to Sun does not change. This practically is very useful because if you have to compare the maps, the image of different region of the Earth, then you can do it practically at the same hour of the time. If you have to compare map of the same place but at different point in time, then also it is pretty useful to compare the maps of the place when they are captured at the same local time. There is another advantage of Sun synchronous orbit. Initially, the satellites were using visible rays and infrared rays. And those radiations you can set either at the daytime for visible rays or at the time of dawn or dusk for infrared rays. See, this synchronization with the Sun happens when the inclination is around 98 degree. You would know that the axis of rotation of the Earth is inclined from the plane of rotation by 23.5 degree. And Sun synchronization happens when the plane of the orbit is inclined at around 98 degree. The Sun synchronous orbit could be in the range of 600 to 800 kilometer. If you see in this video, you will see that the satellite is not changing position with respect to the Sun, and that you can understand from the position of satellite with respect to the illuminated area on the Earth. As the area of illumination is changing, so is the position of the satellite. It will be a mental exercise for you to visualize the whole thing. See the position of the Earth with respect to Sun, and then see the position and revolution of Sun synchronous satellite around the Earth. And then try and understand what should be the inclination of this satellite so that it remains stationary with respect to the Sun. India launched its first Earth observation satellite back in 1988, named as IRS-1A. Presently, India has 13 operational satellites in Sun synchronous orbit. They are RISAT 1, 2, 2A, Cartosat 1, 2, 2A, 2B. We have RISAT 1 and 2, and further the third satellite has been launched. That is Earth Observation Satellite 01. We have OceanSat 2, we have Mehrgarh Tropics, we have Saral, we have SCATSat. But there are certain Earth observation satellite in the geostationary orbit as well. If you want continuous monitoring of an area, then the satellite position with respect to Earth must not change, and that can happen only in geostationary orbits. In the geostationary satellites, mostly we have INSAT series. Earth observation satellite, as the name suggests, can be used to observe anything, right from the land and forest mapping to soil assessment, mapping of other resources like water, any minerals, even fishes. Satellites in the geostationary orbit are very useful for weather and climate observation. If we have to keep an eye on cyclone development in Bay of Bengal or other part of Indian Ocean, then geostationary satellites would be more useful. As we have seen before, Earth Observation Satellite 01 is a kind of RISAT, Radar Imaging Satellite. So we'll talk a little bit about RISAT. RISAT, first of all, is a series of Indian radar imaging reconnaissance satellite. Reconnaissance satellites are also called as intelligence satellites, or informally they are also called as spy satellites. They provide all-weather surveillance, and all-weather surveillance is because of synthetic aperture radars. It is the radar system that provides all-weather surveillance. Radar, which stands for Radio Detection and Ranging System, uses radio waves. Radio waves, you would be aware, is used for long distance communication, and they passes through clouds, rains. These are transparent for the radio wave. This is the advantage of radio wave satellite over optical or infrared based satellites. And you must know that RISAT series is the first all-weather Earth observation satellite from ISRO. And with the launch of Earth Observation Satellite 01, the constellation of 3 satellites is completed. The other 2 being RISAT 2B and RISAT 2B R1. The previous Earth observation satellites of India were primarily optical or spectral sensors, which included electromagnetic radiations mostly in the infrared range, and their working were hampered by cloud cover. Radar imaging satellites are also very effective. The synthetic aperture radar system which is there in these satellites, they are used to create 2-dimensional or 3-dimensional images very accurately. So completion of the constellation with the launch of EOS-01 is a game changer for Indian space science and also for defense technology, because they can be used as intelligence satellites or spy satellites. Now let's talk about a new technology that has been introduced in the Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle. Generally what happens, launch vehicles are used for taking the satellite at the right point in the space and then releasing them. And then the satellite will start orbiting the Earth or any other planet that it is designed to. Once its job is done, then the job of the rocket or the launch vehicle is over. It was useful only for that time. But a variant of Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle has been developed that does not become waste after launching all its satellite. Instead, the last stage of the vehicle itself becomes a satellite. As the launch vehicle goes up and up in the space, some part of it is spent and the vehicle becomes smaller and smaller. After the job is done in this variant of PSLV, the last stage itself will become a satellite, and it will have a lifespan of around 6 months. So it can carry some instruments, and those instruments will be on board the last stage, and that can be used to perform some experiments in the space. In general, for PSLV, from the perspective of prelims examination, you must know that these are considered as 3rd generation launch vehicles. GSLV are considered as 4th generation launch vehicles. They have 4 stages, 2 stages are solid, 2 stages are liquid. The first and third stage are solid stages, and the second and the fourth stages are liquid stages, meaning they have solid and liquid fuel respectively. PSLV's first successful launch was in 1994. The launch of Earth Observation Satellite 01 was the 51st launch of the satellite. Till 2019, the satellite has launched 50 Indian satellites, and this one was the 51st. So far, there has been only 2 failures in the launch, and that is a phenomenal performance by PSLV. You must also know that PSLV has been used for very important launches to Moon, to Mars, and very soon Aditya L1 mission to Sun will also use PSLV. So PSLV is not just for launching to the polar satellites. It can be used to take the satellite to geostationary transfer orbits as well. Now let's take up a question from Prelims 2018. The question is, with reference to India's satellite launch vehicles, consider the following statements. Statement 1 is, PSLVs launch satellites useful for Earth resources monitoring, whereas GSLVs are designed mainly to launch communication satellites. We have seen that PSLVs send satellites to polar orbits or to sun synchronous orbits, and both the orbits are used for Earth observation or Earth resource monitoring. or remote sensing. So this statement is absolutely correct. The second statement is satellites launched by PSLV appear to remain permanently fixed in the same position in the sky as observed from any location on the Earth. PSLVs send satellites in the polar orbit or sun synchronous orbit, which are used for mapping the entire Earth. So if the satellites would remain stationary with respect to Earth, it will not be able to do its job. Rather, the satellites in the geostationary orbit, they remain fixed with respect to Earth. So this statement is obviously very incorrect. The third statement is GSLV Mark III is a 4-staged launch vehicle with first and third stages using solid rocket motors and the second and fourth stages using liquid rocket engine. We have seen this statement actually with regard to Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle. It has 4 stages. The first and third stage has solid rocket motors and the second and fourth stages use liquid rocket engines. So this statement given in the context of GSLV Mark III is incorrect because it is true for PSLV. So the correct option is option A. Let us see another question from Prelims 2015. In which of the following activities are Indian remote sensing satellites used? The activities given are assessment of crop productivity, locating groundwater resources, mineral exploration, telecommunications, traffic studies. See, telecommunication obviously can be carried out by geostationary satellites because if they are moving with respect to Earth, that means if they are not geostationary, then you will have grave problem of call drops. Remote sensing satellites, as we have seen, are in low Earth orbits. That means they are either in polar orbits or sun synchronous orbits. So a satellite in polar orbit or sun synchronous orbit cannot be used for telecommunication, which means activity 4 cannot be in the right option. Now you have to decide whether activity 3 is correct or not. Activity 3 is mineral exploration. We have seen that remote sensing basically is giving information on physical, chemical or biological composition of a system, of a landscape. And mineral exploration basically is giving information on chemical composition of a system. Additionally, if you can get information on crop productivity or water resource, why can you not get information on mineral resource? So obviously the correct answer would be option A. There is an article on page number 13, the FAQ section of the Hindu. The title of the article is NEET Quota in Tamil Nadu. See, recently the governor of Tamil Nadu has given assent to a bill that provides for 7.5% reservation in the seats in undergraduate medical admissions for government school students who qualified NEET. This is a kind of horizontal reservation. We'll come in a while as to what is vertical and horizontal reservation, but the purpose is to reduce the de facto inequalities between the government school students and private school students. The state government believes that the students from government schools and rural areas, they are not able to afford the coaching which would be essential for competitive examinations. And the state government has a statistical basis for giving this reservation. In the state of Tamil Nadu, approximately 38.3% schools are run by government. And because of this, 41% students in higher secondary schools are in government-run schools. Out of 5,550 medical seats in Tamil Nadu, 4,043 are of state quota. Despite this, only 0.15% of seats have been given to students hailing from poor economic backgrounds who study in government schools. So there is a strong quantitative compelling reason to give reservation to students hailing from rural areas educated in government schools. The state government was also running coaching for NEET exam, but it didn't work out very well and it did not help in increasing the percentage of students from government schools getting into medical colleges. This decision of giving horizontal reservation of 7.5% is based on the report of one-person commission headed by the former Madras High Court Judge, Justice P. Karayarasan. The quantitative analysis of socio-economic background of students that we have seen just now, that was done by the commission, and the commission made observation that students from government schools are placed at a disadvantageous position compared to their counterparts in private schools. There is a cognitive gap created by socio-economic factors such as caste, wealth, parental occupation, parental education, gender, etc., and that is not filled by few months of coaching given by the state government. So there's a need of reservation. The commission recommended for 10% seats in the government medical colleges, but finally government has come up with 7.5% reservation. This 7.5% of horizontal reservation are for students who will be qualifying NEET, and they must have studied in the government school from class 6 onwards. Now we will discuss this issue of horizontal reservation and vertical reservation. See, it all began in the Indra Sawhney judgment that was given in 1992 in the aftermath of Mandal Commission report. Supreme Court in this judgment held that all reservations are not of the same nature, and the court essentially classified reservation as vertical reservations and horizontal reservations. Supreme Court said that the reservations in favor of scheduled castes, scheduled tribes and other backward classes which are provided by Article 16(4), they can be called as vertical reservations. And reservations in favor of physically handicapped provisioned by Clause 1 of Article 16, that can be called as horizontal reservation. Simplistically, horizontal reservation actually cut across vertical reservation. For example, if horizontal reservation of 3% is given to physically handicapped candidates, then that physically handicapped candidate can be from SC community or ST community or OBC community or from general community. So horizontal reservation actually results in interlocking of reservation. In the Indra Sawhney judgment, Supreme Court also put a bar on reservation to not increase more than 50% of the seats. But that 50% capping is mostly for vertical reservation. And that is why there was a differentiation in horizontal reservation and vertical reservation. Now let me explain you a little bit more on horizontal reservation and vertical reservation so that you understand it very well. Suppose there has to be an exam for 100 seats. And for the sake of simplicity, let's assume that all 100 seats are for the same post. And the reservation is of 30%. If this 30% reservation is vertical, then what you do is you make a merit list of all the candidates. Then you take top 70 students. This 70 student will include general and reserve both. Then after 70, you remove the general candidates from the merit list. Then you create a truncated merit list only of reserve category, and then you take top 30 again. That will correspond to 70 plus 30. And obviously you understand that reserve category will not only be 30, they will be here in this 70 as well. Now suppose the reservation is horizontal in nature. In this case, what you do, you again create the merit list of all the candidates. Then you take top 100 students. Now you see among these 100 students, if 30 students are from the reserve category, then you have to do nothing. This is the final result. If there are more than 30, then very well, this is the final result. But if there are less than 30, then this is not the final result. Suppose there are only 25 students from the reserve category in top 100. Then what you do is you knock out the 5 people from the general category at the bottom, and then you pull in 5 people from the reserve category from the rest of the merit list. Finally, you must have 30 people in the final merit list from the reserve category. This is how horizontal reservation works. I hope that is clear. Supreme Court will be taking all the cases of all the states concerning reservation together. The state of Tamil Nadu already had 69% of reservation. With this 7.5% of additional reservation, it will go even more. Can that be allowed? Can other horizontal reservation given by other states be allowed? All of that will be taken together by the Supreme Court. There are various petitions in the Supreme Court presently, and Supreme Court has said that all the issues of reservation will be taken up together. So we will have to wait for the judgment of the Supreme Court to understand and know if these reservations given by the state government can be constitutionally defended. There is another article on the Science and Tech page. Ancient skeleton offers clues on prehistoric era. This skeleton has been found by German researchers and they are piecing together the life of this prehistoric woman whose skeleton has been found. She is estimated to have died 5,000 years ago. 5,000 years ago was the Neolithic period. The lady has been named as Lady of Beitiko. Beitiko is a village in Germany from where this skeleton has been found. The Lady of Beitiko is estimated to be of 30 to 45 years when she died. The most important observation that the anthropologists are making is this. Lady of Beitiko, her teeth are severely eroded and missing completely in some places. From carbon dating, it is already known that she died some 5,000 years ago. And we already know while constructing our history that this 5,000 years ago lie in the Neolithic period. And we know that during Neolithic period, human first introduced grains into their diet. But introduction of this grain led to deterioration of humans' health. And this is seen in the state of the Lady of Beitiko's teeth. The teeth are eroded and some of them are completely missing from their places. This basically reinforces the knowledge that we already had, that during the Neolithic period, the introduction of grain led to deterioration of general health of people. That also led to erosion of teeth of general population. For the civil service prelims examination, you have to know that the prehistoric age, which refers to the time when there was no writing, this age is divided into 5 periods. The division is based on the tools that people used. And these 5 periods are Paleolithic or the Old Stone Age, Mesolithic, the Middle Stone Age, Neolithic, the New Stone Age. If you see the period of Neolithic, it is between 8000 BC to 4000 BC and 5000 BC will lie in Neolithic period. The Lady of Beitiko, who is estimated to be living some 5,000 years ago, was obviously living in Neolithic period. Then comes Chalcolithic period when copper or bronze was used, and then the Iron Age that led to easy cutting down of trees, expansion of empire that will ultimately result in formation of Mahajanapadas. Concerning Neolithic period, you have to know that this is the time when agriculture started. So grains like ragi, wheat, horse gram, they were introduced into human diet. Life will now move from nomadic to sedentary settled life. And for settled life, you need storage of food grains. It is said that necessity is the mother of invention. Requirement of storage will result in invention of pottery. That would come from the discovery of wheel. And obviously they knew how to make fire. You must also know that it was in Neolithic period that the intentional disposal of the dead started. Neolithic sites are very important from the exam perspective. The most important Neolithic site in the Indian subcontinent is Mehrgarh. It is considered as the oldest agricultural settlement in the Indian subcontinent. It flourished around 7000 BC. It was located on the bank of river Bolan. It is a tributary of Indus. The present location will correspond to the eastern edge of the Balochistan Plateau. It is in Pakistan presently. Then you have to know other important Neolithic sites, for example, Gufkral and Burzahom in Kashmir. You must know that in Burzahom, people lived in pit dwellings rather than building houses on the ground. Mehrgarh, Chopani Mando and Koldiva in the Bilan Valley in Uttar Pradesh are other important Neolithic sites. It is very important to know that the Bilan Valley sites of the Neolithic period has provided the oldest evidence of rice cultivation in any part of the world. Chirand in Bihar is another important Neolithic site in India. Some very important Neolithic sites are to be found in South India as well. That will include Kokedal, Utnur, Nagarjuni Konda, Palavo in the present time Andhra Pradesh. Then sites like Tekkal Kolta, Maski, Halur, Brahmagiri in Karnataka, and sites like Periyamalpalli in Tamil Nadu. This article is from the Science and Tech page of today's The Hindu. The title of the article is Soak in the Sun, Sleep Early and Tight to Avoid Myopia. See, myopia, as you would remember from your knowledge of class 10th, is also called as short-sightedness. Even in normal parlance, we say don't be myopic in your view. Myopic means you are not able to see beyond what is in front of you, what is near you. Myopia is a medical condition in which you are only able to focus or clearly see on nearby objects, and the far-off objects appear blurry. Myopia is turning out to be an epidemic across India and also across the world. The article gives the data that in the year 2000, around 25% of world population was nearsighted or myopic, but the rate at which the cases are increasing, it is estimated that by 2050, 50% of population would be myopic in their sight, hopefully not in their opinion. There are various causes of myopia that the article highlights. Myopia could also be genetic because of myopic genes, but the environmental conditions are also responsible for myopia. If one is engaged in prolonged near work, or there is less exposure of sunlight, and this is particularly where this article becomes important personally to you. If you are being a bookworm these days, or you are doing prolonged study in library where walls or the compartments are very close by and you do not have an opportunity for far sights, then you have risk for myopia. Spending less time outdoors in general is a risk factor for myopia. You all will remember this eye diagram from your class 10th memory. Here is the eye lens fixed by ciliary muscles. Then there is pupil through which the light enters the eye. The outer portion of the eye, cornea, then aqueous humor, the vitreous humor, so hence and so forth. I'm not going to discuss the structure of eye in detail, but what is important here to know that the eye lens actually directs the light on the retina. The image which is formed there is taken to the brain by the optic nerve where it is interpreted. There will be problem with eyesight if the image is not formed exactly on retina. If it is formed beyond it or before it, there would be eyesight related problem. For the sake of understanding, let me take this highly simplified diagram of eye. When the object is near to the eye, the angle with which the light rays come is larger. When the object is at far distance, then the angle at which the light ray comes is lower, obviously. So to make the image of nearby object, higher converging power of the lens is required because the angle between the light ray is larger. And for light rays coming from far off object, lower converging power will be required, obviously. So the converging power of eye lens has to change continuously when we focus on objects at different distances. The problem occurs when we continuously focus on nearby objects. The eye lens has to set in such a manner that the converging power of the lens is high. And when we do not focus often on far off object, then the flexibility of the eye lens and the ability to change the contracting power or the focal length of the lens decreases. Now suppose the light ray coming from far off object that is also converged with higher converging power, then the light rays coming from the far off object will be converged at a smaller distance. So that will be converging in front of retina. So if you do prolonged near work, the eye lens will be set to do near work. The eye lens will be set to see the nearby objects clearly. So far off objects will look blurry. Alternatively, if suppose the eyeball gets elongated, then also the light ray coming off from far off objects will find it difficult to get converged on the retina. Because the angle between the light rays coming from far off objects is already less, it will be easily converged and it will be converged in front of retina again. So if there is elongation of the eyeball, then also far off objects will be formed in front of retina and again they will look blurry. And when there is less exposure to sunlight, then the shape of the eyeball is not regulated, it gets elongated, and that is another cause of myopia. So myopia also occurs when the eyeball becomes longer. So less exposure to sunlight and prolonged near work makes it difficult to focus on distant objects clearly, and this condition is called as myopia. or nearsightedness or short-sightedness. How do you correct myopia? The problem in myopia is the image is being formed in front of retina because eye lens is converging the light more than required. So the light rays needs to be diverged, and that external divergence is caused by concave lens in the eyeglasses. So this over-converging power of eye lens is decreased by adding a diverging lens, a concave lens. So for myopia correction, you require eyeglasses with concave lens. The article gives insight from the research work as to how outdoor brightness help in protecting human from myopia. First of all, if you are in the outdoor space, then you have ample opportunity to focus on far-off objects. So there is no prolonged near work. So the stress on the eye is reduced and the ability of the eye lens to focus on far-off object is not lost. That adaptability to focus on nearby objects and again to focus on far-off object is maintained. The outdoor environment provides an optical stimuli to various parts of peripheral retina, and this is also responsible for control in the growth of eyeballs. Eyeball does not unnecessarily gets elongated. Apart from that, sunlight has color of all wavelength, unlike the indoor lights or the artificial lights that have specific wavelengths. So this additionally helps the eye, not in terms of myopia, but in the general health of the eye. The sunlight, as you also know, helps in producing vitamin D, and vitamin D essentially helps in the normal functioning of the eye. Additionally, exposure to bright eye releases the hormone dopamine. Dopamine you must all be familiar with. Generally it is thought of as pleasure hormone. But dopamine not exactly is pleasure hormone. It does help us feel good. But technically it is more of a motivational factor. It drives us towards doing things which we like. But dopamine has a very wide range of function apart from giving us happiness or pleasure. Dopamine also controls the length of the eyeball. So if exposure to bright sunlight is for shorter time, then there is more risk for myopia. There is a news article on the Science and Tech page, Lessons from Ladakh's Glacial Lake Outburst. See, Glacial Lake is a lake that is formed in the higher altitude due to melting of glaciers. Water flow down because of melting glaciers on the mountain and they get accumulated in somewhat lower region. It may so happen that the lake may remain frozen throughout the year. But you know that within the glacier in the interior region or within the frozen lake in the interior region, water is in liquid state. And you also know that on freezing, water gets expanded. The volume of the ice is 10% more than volume of corresponding amount of water. And because of that expansion, the walls of the lake may get bursted. And this is the outburst that the article is referring to. As you can see in the picture, there is a crack. It seems like the wall has bursted. When the outburst happens, then the water from the interior of the lake will gush out and the flooding will happen. And that is called as Glacial Lake Outburst Flood. This is a new challenge, a new disaster, and accordingly, new planning is required. The article highlights that there are more reasons for glacial lake outburst flood than the traditional reasons that we pay attention to. Generally, it was thought that because of the rupture of the wall of the lake, the flooding happens. But the article has highlighted that recent studies in the Ladakh region have shown that the flooding may not happen because of a spillover, meaning more and more water coming due to melting of glaciers or bursting of the upper region, the upper wall of the lake, but it can also happen because of tunneling drainage process. The lake may have internal outlet and that outlet may burst and the water from the lake may come because of that outlet and not because of the spillover effect. Generally, spillover effect was thought to be the reason for the bursting of the lake because when the water comes down from the glaciers from the upper mountains, it brings with itself what is called as moraine, the rocks and the pebbles and things of that sort. And as is the case even in dams, when the river water keeps flowing and suddenly it is stopped by the dam, then the debris in the river will get accumulated towards the edge. Same will happen here as well. The debris, the moraines will get accumulated towards the edge, towards the end of the lake. As the river water or the ice level rises, these moraines, these loose debris, they are more prone to get broken. An outburst happens from there, and then the flooding happens. But since more reasons have been highlighted, it requires that we do more detailed study of these lakes and more planning is required because the tunneling drainage process has not been analyzed very well in the glacial lakes. Now let us do question for the day. Yesterday's question was, which of the following statement is correct about 15th Finance Commission recommendation? It has reduced the share of estates in the central taxes from 42% to 41%. This is absolutely correct because of formation of Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. The second statement was it has used 1971 census, which is absolutely wrong. 1971 census has not been used at all. The second statement is incorrect. Answer would be option A. Today's question is this. Consider the following statements related to Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle. Statement 1, it is used for launching satellites in sun synchronous orbit only. Statement 2, it is a 4-staged launch vehicle with the first and third stages using solid rocket motors and the second and fourth stages using liquid rocket engine. The third statement is the launch vehicle has no utility after the satellites are placed in the orbit. Your options are 1 and 2 only, 2 only, 2 and 3 only, or all of the above. With this, we have come to the end of the session. Thank you very much for hearing me out and do not forget to attempt the DNS quiz on our eLearn platform.